I know so many of you are diehard fans of Lil Mumma. Now, why wouldn't you be? She was released 2 years ago today, and she is still so popular at my markets. People say she is the perfect crossbody when you're just wanting to carry the essentials, and she has a bit of style rather than just a flat, simple crossbody bag. Well, I've had so much fun making her lately. I have been stabilizing her a little bit more than I would have done in the past. This has got a very thin foam. Love the structure. That one has fleece, and that is like this one. Now, what is different from this one? It is a Hip Mumma. So Hip Mumma now has wings. So this is included with a Lil Mumma pattern. So it is now the Hip Mumma and the Lil Mumma. I'm going to do the tutorial for Hip Mumma today. It is quite a formal tutorial. In the future, I'll do a couple of sew-alongs and we'll have some fun with it and maybe do some hacks. So yeah, I've changed it up a little bit to accommodate the wings, but that is included with the Lil Mumma pattern now. It's available as an add-on as well if you already own Lil Mumma. But wait, there's more. What do you do if you need to carry a little bit more than just the essentials? Today, we also released the Boss Mumma. Now, the Boss Mumma pattern is not just a big version of Lil Mumma. It has a split gusset with a base. It has a split zipper pocket to accommodate a handle, as well as its own feature zipper pocket. So I shall link the Boss Mumma pattern and tutorial down below if you want to check those out. But for now, and so the tutorial for Hip Mumma. Please excuse a little bandage on my hand. I just nicked the top of my hand with my rotary cutter. Not a smart move. So this is our body. I have got Decaville and a very, very thin compressed fleece because I want to have a bit of structure. This will soften up nicely as it's sewn. It's quite rigid initially, but it will soften up. We've got one fused and one without. So I have got my Decaville and my fleece. We need to keep those separate. We will do that later. Our linings, we have 2 with medium weight interfacing and 2 which we have fused wrong sides together. You can do that later if you wish. I find it easier to do it as I am doing my cutting. So that is all my bodies. We have our back pocket. I have only used Decaville. I could have put some fleece because it is going to be next to the body, but I think it'll be okay. And we have our lining with medium weight interfacing. So there is outlined in the pattern, in the cutting chart, where you might need to use interfacing, where you might need to use Decaville and fleece or foam. So I like a bit of structure to my bags, as you're probably aware if you follow my channel. But if you like them soft and slouchy, by all means, just use medium weight interfacing. So these are our wings. Now these are cut in pairs, and be aware of that when you're cutting. So we've got 2 exterior. Again, I've used the fleece and Decaville. Could have got away with that probably without it, but I wanted to give it a try. And our lining for each of those. Now we've got a D-ring tab. Now this is just one. We fold that and cut it under my tag. Then we've got interior slip pocket. Now it is a small slip pocket, but it's ideal for your keys or for a couple of credit cards or something if you're going for a walk. We've got our zipper panels. Now again, 2 I have medium weight interfacing, Decaville and the fleece, and 2 I haven't because I am using this for my gusset panel because I think it's quite a cool contrast. So we've got 2 with lining and 2 is our exterior. And then for our gusset panel, the bottom, we have got 1 with medium weight interfacing. Now I'll use that for the lining. This will be my exterior. And again, I've put the Decaville and the fleece on that out of the seam allowances. So then as far as our hardware goes, I'm using these plastic toggles or these plastic D-rings. You can either use your tab for those or you can use a strip of your webbing cut the same length and use it like that. I'm going to use that because I think that'll be quite cool, but I might change my mind as I'm going through. So I've got 2 of those. I'm also using the same 1-inch set for my slider and for my side release buckle. I've got my length of zip. You'll need your 2 zips, one for the front and one around the top. So I've got my 2 zipper pulls for the top and one for the front. I've got my logo, and I'm also going to put a cute little heart pocket sticker out the side of my pocket. So that is everything we're going to need to make our Hip Mumma. I also use some glue I also use double fold bias binding, and that is this here. So if you're cutting bias binding, just cut that 4.5 times your seam width. So let's get on and sew. So when you start Hip Mumma, there is on page 4 this flow chart, and it tells you Little Mumma do that, Hip Mumma do that. So we're going to go the requirements cutting charts on page 12, and then we're going to construct the back and do that. So let's go and construct the back. So the first thing it's going to want us to do is do the back pocket. So what lining and exterior right sides together, clip them in place. As you can see, I always cut my lining a little bit rough and trim it up off my exterior when I'm done. Okay, so we're going to sew up there to a point, across, and then down just to the bottom. We're not sewing across the bottom, so just up, along, and down. So that's all sewn. I'm going to trim around the curve only with my pinking shears. And trim the top. We're going to turn that in. Put your finger right up in that top peak. I guess this is where we see how well my little domestic has sewn it. Now don't use anything too sharp, but you do want that peak to be out. So we're going to start here and top stitch around the curve, and that's all. So that's all sewn. Then we want to find our back. Now our back is the one that has our deck of a light attached to it, and we should have our centres marked on everything. I'm really slack with this. Now if you are doing what I'm doing and snipping, take the tiniest snip, because don't forget our seam allowances are fairly small on this pattern. Okay. Now you can baste along the bottom if you wish. So line up your bottom two. So you can see my bottom is lined up there. And we're going to sew down each side. Now do back stitch well here and here. So it is coming at a curve, so keep that nice on a curve to keep that look. And you might need to use a hump jumper coming on to the top. So that's all stitched, and I have basted along the bottom. So that's quite solid, and that is our back. Let's put that aside, and we will retrieve our wings. So we've got our two sets. We want to put those right sides together. So lining and exterior together. Now if you find it easier, you can put a mark at the end here, because we're sewing down here, but we're stopping at a point here. So we're sewing down here, but we're stopping at a point there. So if you need to put a mark, so we're going to sew down here and stop there. Start there and sew to there, and do that on both. So it's the two curved edges stopping 1/4 inch or 6 mil. So we have got those stitched, and as you can see, I've stopped short on both of them. I'm now going to use my tab. So I've only put medium weight interfacing down the middle of this, depends what you're using. As I said, you could also use a length of your webbing, whatever works for you. I like to keep these really tight to the bag, so we're going to fold that over. So it is a raw edge, and that's why I like them really, really tight in, close to the actual D-ring as you can. So now we're going to top stitch down either side. So yes, that does have a raw edge in the middle, but it's not going to matter. We cut that in half, because what we're wanting to do is have this really, really tight. We're sewing that as close as we can. So there's no way those are going to come out. And also to tape on there if your machine allows you to use it. I've cut mine a little bit shorter than they needed to be, were supposed to be, because I was running out of this material. So they should be about an extra 10 mil longer than this. But that's okay. So isn't it all about adapting? So I'm going to feed them in from that end. And I want it really, really tight as my machine can get it. So it should have an extra little bit out there, but as I said, this is short. So you want that centered in there. The reason I've got you to stop is so that your machine doesn't have to come over, because it's quite difficult for some machines to sew in next to hardware. So now you're just sewing from that stitch to this stitch. Makes it a lot easier, even though it's a little bit fiddly. So we're going to stitch from that stitch there over there to there. Now you might need a hump jumper when you start, because this is quite thick compared to that bit. So that's all done. As you can see, I've started there and come to here. So now we want to chop that corner off. So we're coming in really tight to our, and then going off the side like that. Now we want to turn those through. Now, depending on what fabric you've used, this can be quite thick if you're top stitching on a domestic. So if it's too thick for you, then just leave it and give it a good press, because it doesn't have to be top stitched. It is purely a visual thing. So now, if your machine will allow it, top stitch around the edge. I also stick a rivet in there. Normally there should be enough sticking through to put a rivet in there, but of course mine isn't. So they are all top stitched and up here. So now we're going to retrieve our back with the pocket attached. We are going to place these wrong sides together. Now I line them up with the top of the pocket, but you can obviously put them further down if you wish, but because of the weight in the bag I want them a little bit higher. But if you're concerned it's too close to here, you can always move them down. So if you're wanting to make sure they're in line with the top of the pocket, you can sit a ruler across it like that and line it up like that. And I suggest basting these in place, and you could also put a piece of tape over here to keep it all together while you're sewing the rest. So let's do that. So let's baste those now. So that is our back, and so I have obviously got lining on my wings, but if you've got exterior, 4 of them, that's what will show. So I'm just going to wrap a piece of tape around both of my tabs to keep them out the way as I'm making the bag. So let's put that aside, and we're going to go back to Lil Mumma. So now we go to step 2, where we're doing our pocket, our slip pocket. So fold that in half, right sides together. And we are going to sew around the edge, leaving a turning gap in the middle. So now we want to trim our corners. Depending on what fabric you're using, you might not want to come too close. Turn our pocket inside out. Now we want to fold in our turning gap. So now we want to get one of our body lining. So we're going to go 1 inch up from the back. So we want to get centered and 1 inch up from the bottom, and then we're going to sew down, around and back up. Make sure this is folded in nice and neatly. So you might have picked up my mistake. I was meant to top stitch along the top of my pocket, but I'm not going to take it off to do that now. So that's our back lining. So if we retrieve our back and we put that together with our back, line up our centers. Now it's up to you with whether you want to baste around the edges of that. I actually usually tend to run a bead of glue around there, and it holds it all nicely. Depends on what fabric you're using. If you're using vinyl, you might not want to keep putting basting stitching through your vinyl. So I've clipped that together. So that is our back. Let's put that aside. The fun bit, we're going to stack some fabric now. Now normally you don't have a piece of fleece, but I've got a piece of fleece as well, but you can do if you want. On a cutting board is easier. We're going to stack a piece of exterior right side up, our lining with the interfacing right side up, so it's right sides together, and our deck of a light centered on that with the glue facing up, if that makes any sense. And I'm obviously going to put my fleece over the top as well. So I've got it on a cutting board because we're now going to cut through all of these. So I'm actually going to cut that separate so I can see what I'm doing. So we want to clip these together because we want to keep these exactly in place while we cut it. So now I can put my fleece in the clips. So now we're wanting to make sure the base is level on your cutting board. Get a rotary cutter, and we're wanting to cut 40mm from this edge. So it's 40mm or 1.5 inches. And you're wanting to do this in one clean cut, like that. Unclip those. So the 2 bits of Decavol light and our fleece, we now want to take our seam allowance off here. As I'm going to take, I take 3/4 off here, 3/8 sorry, for this seam. And I'll do the same with my fleece. Actually, I might cut a little bit more off my fleece. So we want to get our exterior. And if everything was stacked the right way, this will be the right way. We want to centre that on there and centre that on there. So I shall go and press that in place. So that is what we have got. We have got our front with our Decavol fused and our exterior. So what we want to do now is get our length of zip that we're going to be using. It does give you a measurement in the pattern, but I always just cut it and leave a little bit overhanging. And I always even melt it just when I'm working with it. So I actually split my zip. I find that easier to work with. So I'm going to put it right sides together down the edge of there like that. Now you can use tape here if you want to. I always use a 3mm or 1/8 of an inch when I'm putting tape down the edge of a zipper. Nothing bigger than that, because then I'm not stitching through it. So we're sticking that edge right sides together over there like that. Push it onto our tape. So you can either do these one at a time, or you can just do them both together like this. Now it's nice if it's matched up, but it really doesn't matter at this point because you can match that up when you put your, just easier when you put your pull on if it is matched up. So you can base down here now if you wish. I'm going to actually do it all together. I'm going to put another piece of tape over the top and put this right sides together. Now make sure that it's lining up around the edge. It's a little bit, goes a bit further down. You can see it lines up there and lines up there. So we've got it around the edge there, lining it up at that point. So all those lines should be level and it should be matched up at the top and bottom. Right, so we're now going to sew down both those edges, and the seam allowance is given to us in the pattern. So there's both of our pieces. So fold those over and give them a bit of a crease because we don't want them slipping back over to the edge of the zip. Clip them in place. Make sure they meet. There is a tendency that it wants to pull back, but they are the same size and they will fit if it's in the right place at the back. So this one, it's just a matter of making sure they're both back as you top stitch. So we want to top stitch down both of those edges. So they're all done. So what we might want to do now before we go much further is to put our name tag on. Now you can put it in the middle or you can put it slightly at the side. I'm just going to put it slightly at the side, I think. So you open that up and I think I'll put it about, and I put some tape over the back. So now we will put our zipper pull on. So check what the distance is at the bottom. Put it on from the bottom, but you are going to put it on and take it off again, so you still need to have it lined up. Yep, that goes up on a curve, and that's right. So put it on from the bottom and middle, stop middle halfway. So that is our front all done. So what I suggest is getting the back and just checking that the shape around here and around here is the same. If your seam allowance isn't right or your zip's not a standard zip, it may be out and you may need to trim just to make sure that's the right shape. But that all fits. So now we want to retrieve our lining that is double-sided or fused together and put it behind our front. Make sure your lining in there is not dropping back. And you don't want anything pulling, so if you sit it flat on the table, everything's going to be down as it should be. Right, so I'm just going to baste around there, and as I do, I'm going to double back over the zip. Now don't forget, keep your basting at 3mm or 1/8 of an inch. So that's our front all done. So now you can trim your zipper tape. Now that's why you have a double-sided lining, because in there you've got the right side, and in there out the back you've got the right side. But don't open your zip, you want to keep it closed at the top. So if you're trimming it, I suggest leaving it a good little bit above and trim it in the shape of the bag, like that. But that should actually be a bit higher. So trim any linings if you do a rough lining cut like I do. Trim them to match your bag. And like always, when you trim your zip, give it a really good melt from both sides, not just the back. Right, so that is our front. And that's our back. So we should put those aside and work on our... Now I'm sorry this is going to be a little bit confusing because I've got the same fabric, but one has the fleece on it and one doesn't. So obviously my zip is way too long because this is just a piece I had left. So I'm going to put that right sides together with, this is my exterior, and I am going to use some tape like we did before. Put that across the end. Now I've seen people use glue stick. You can do all sorts to keep your zip in place. You can baste it. So I'll put that on the other exterior piece. I am looking for a good quality glue stick, fabric glue stick. So if anyone knows a brand that is really good, I'd like to stock that in the shop. So we're going to take that off there and put our zip right side down. So this is my exterior, remember, putting it right side down and lining up the top. Now you can split your zipper, which I might do and do them both at once. You just have to make sure, if you do this, that it's the right way around. So it's like that. I'm going to put more tape over the top. So if you keep the 1/8 of an inch tape, you're not going to be sewing over it because it will be in your seam allowance. My domestic definitely does not like double-sided tape. My industrial not so bad, but not the domestic. So now we're going to take our lining, don't forget I'm using the same, right side over the top. So you've got right sides together, lining up the ends like we did before. Make sure they're level along the top. Double-sided tape is not holding on this nylon. So we're going to sew down both of those, and we are given the seam allowance in the pattern. So if you've basted or done some other way, that's great. It doesn't matter how you achieve this, as long as that's what you get. Your linings are right side together with your zip right side with your exterior. So they're all done. So now we want to open them up like we do with any zipper panel. Just force it open like that and clip down this side. Now it does require a bit of pushing from both seams because the zipper panel is quite small. Top stitch down the zip end on both sides and baste around the rest of it. So we'll do that on both sides. So that is your two zipper panels. So I'm going to put my zipper pulls on. So it looks like it's pretty even on that side, with that one being high. So put one on from each end. Speed up. So that one goes on first on this side. Now make sure there's no big bulges in the middle and that it's right. So I'm going to trim my zipper. I do leave my zip a little bit long. Don't need to trim it any shorter. So now we want to take our exterior gusset panel. Now we're going to lie it right sides together over the end. Now depending on your seam allowance for your zip or the size of your zip, if you've used a non-standard zip, if one of these doesn't match, it's no biggie, just trim the one that needs trimmed down. So, and I'm going to bring that side up to there. So still right sides together, just at the end of our zip. I'm going to turn that over, get my lining, and add my lining to be right sides together with my lining, and just slide that into the back of the clips. Same with the other end. Lining right side together with the lining. So now we're wanting to sew across both of those ends, and we're given the seam allowance in the pattern. So that is what you've got. So what we need to do is turn it to be right side out. So open the and flip it over. So it's the external one that you're flipping out like that. So then it forms a ring. So now we want to top stitch those seams there. So in the Lil Mumma you would have your D-rings in here, but because we've got wings we haven't got our D-rings in there. So depending on what you've used, this could be fairly heavy. Use a hump jumper and go slow, and just sew across, top stitch across there and across there. We're then going to baste right around this loose piece here, and then we're going to line up our center points and baste around the bottom of the ring on both sides. So that is our gusset ring. It's all top stitched and I have basted it around the bottom. So the way I do my binding, I actually include it in with that basting stitch. So I'm going to do my binding on my gusset. Now this differs from the pattern, but I want to show you a few hacks that I find really easy. Normally binding would go on a gusset ring like this, and I turn it inside out. So we're working on the inside. I've marked my centers. Double fold bias. Now this should be about 4.5 times the thickness of your seam allowance. So I'm going to put it just past, about 1 inch past the center point, and I always do a join at the top. I'm going to fold that over at a 90 degrees. So fold that over and put that there. Then I'm just going to just gently stretch it all the way around. Lift that clip and put it in there. Then you want to cut it so that it's just past where the edge of the turn is. So just up to 1 inch past that, and just trim a little bit. So that's the edge along there. And the reason that is you want that edge to come off so that it brings it in here. So we would do that on both sides. and then bring that onto the edge. I find this easier to now baste that in place. You could have done that if you've basted the ring. You could have done that all at once. So let's baste around both of those. So that is our binding all attached to our ring. Makes it so much easier. I'm going to attach the front. So it doesn't really matter which way on this one. So I'm going to find my center mark, line it up with my center mark there, and put a clip in there. So I'm going to put a couple of clips along the top. So then we need to take our center point, which is there, right there, line that up. Now don't forget, if you've got a seam allowance of 1/4 of an inch, put your clips about 1/4 of an inch, not further, because it's going to hold it more than it needs to be. Right, so when we get to here, what we're just going to do is clip a few snips around the corner. Now keep these well under what your seam allowance is. So I find this easier over the edge of a table, but obviously when I'm trying to film, I can't have it over the edge of the table because you wouldn't be able to see what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to push that around like that. Now I see a lot of people staple these, and if that works for you, then by all means use a stapler. I've got lots of stabilizer on here, so it's even stiffer, but if you haven't, you'll find this a bit easier. So now sew right around there with the seam allowance you're given. Now I hold it all in place with an owl as I go, and I really do put a lot of pressure on my owl to keep it in place as I sew. So I'm sewing from this side, and we're going to sew right around at our allotted seam allowance. So that's our seam done. I don't actually trim my seam too much, I just clean up the very end of it. So I'm trimming off any little pieces that aren't level with the rest of it. You don't want anything holding out your binding too much. And again, I know I'm paranoid about this, but melt your zipper. Right, so what I do now, I take my fabric glue and just run it around, not too much. You do want it in your seam allowance, but you don't want it on the body of your bag. A glue stick is perfect for this, but I don't have any left. Now lift your light binding up and over the corners, so you don't want it getting glue all over it. Like that. Give it a tug so that it's definitely flat from that side. Then we're going to roll that under like that, so it's just folded under by about a seam allowance, and roll it over onto our glue. At this point we're rolling that piece inside there and bringing it over. So just rolling it. Now you can have, if you've bought your binding, it should have a nice fold in it already, which makes it so much easier than trying to do this. This glue just rolls off when it's dry, which is good. Easier to do the flats first. Now you can just take your time and do one side at a time with the glue. You don't have to put glue all the way around it at once. The reason I'm gluing it, I want to stitch it from this side because it's so much easier. If you stitch it from this side, it's hard to fight the corners unless you've got a free arm machine. So then we want to come along and stitch just within our seam allowance, because then that's going to catch this side as well, and it should be fine. So that's that side all bound. So now we want to get our back, and now it's good to make sure your zip is open and that's clipped together. So we line up our centre back with our centre front, right sides together. So now we're going to stitch around there the same as we did the other side. Down flat like that and around the whole seam. So that's our second side all sewn. Again, give it a bit of a, because I tend to stick at about a 6mm seam allowance. So I'm going to again put glue around the edge. Alright, so just let that sit for a minute. And then we're going to sew around there the same as what we did. And so that's what it gives you, a binding like that. And then I'll just get those bits of glue off at the end. So there is our Hip Mumma. So the fun bit now is to push your fingers in there and turn it out. And of course mine is a little overstabilised. Careful with your zip. Now with any gusseted bag, actually they're a little bit firm but they'll soften up. What I suggest you do is put, this is not vinyl, this is just normal fabric so it's not going to matter, is put big clips, push it down like that at the top and bottom and sides. It's called shaping the bag because the fabric's used to being in a particular, it's used to being flat, so it just needs to have some memory put in it now to help it remember its new shape. So if you sit it like that overnight or for a couple of hours, will make a huge difference. And it's all part of finishing it. The other thing you can do if your fabric allows it is press a towel inside it and just run an iron around your seams using a Teflon cloth or an ironing cloth. And pocket on the back. And that is our Hip Mumma. So what we need for our strap is our buckle and our webbing. The webbing, and I have cut 4 small rectangles. Now these are to go over the edge of my webbing. I've got my rivet setter and I've got my D-wings which are already attached to my wings. I've put some rivets in there too because I quite like that look. Now our side release buckle, there's so many different types. I'm using this one and just figure out which is the right way up. So let's start by cutting off our short length, which is 200mm or 8 inches. And always singe your edges. Either seal them with lighting, zigzag, whatever you do. A bit of glue, a bit of fray check, but make sure they're sealed. This is seatbelt webbing and it is shocking. So let's place a piece of double-sided tape down the center of our rectangle and just simply fold it over the end of our webbing. I'm going to do that on both ends. Then I'm going to sew down, across and back up. I'm not going to sew over the ends. So now we just want to run our scissors right up the edge of our webbing. If you keep your scissors in really tight, it's not going to catch the webbing. So now I'm going to feed that into my slide release buckle. Then I'm going to feed the other end up and through the D-ring on my bag. Now the reason I'm doing it this way is I want it to be a feature on the outside of my bag. Now you can tuck it under to get your turn either under or on the outside. I actually am happy to have mine on the outside so it becomes a bit of a feature with my little vinyl trim. Now I folded that back about 2 inches using my rivet spacer because it makes it so much easier, and just adhere that with double-sided tape. Now I'm going to put a rivet in each of these. So I'll line up my rivet spacer with the center marks for the 1 inch just to work out where I need to put my rivets because I am shocking at getting my rivets central. So I have put a piece of the vinyl over the end of my long piece. Feed it up and over the center bar of your slide adjuster. Again, bring it through about 2 inches. So I'm just going to put some double-sided tape on there just to hold it in place. Bring it over by 2 inches and just secure it together. So make sure you keep it the right side up, don't allow any twists, and feed it up and over your slide adjuster and over the piece that's already on the bar, keeping it all flat. So I'm going to put the end on. I'm going to put some more tape on my last end and just wrap it over the end like we did before and sew that in place. So trim your sides nicely, and again if you're edge coating or anything, do that now. Because I'm having my piece of vinyl on the outside, I'm coming up and over. If you're having it down, you would go down and under. Again, I'm just going to secure that with double-sided tape. And I'm going to use my rivet spacer tool to bring it across so I know exactly how far it's folded over and it's all going to match. Secure that in place. Mark up for your rivet again. Now, of course, you can sew this. You don't need to use rivets. I just like to add a bit of hardware. And then in here, don't forget, we haven't sewn or riveted in here either. Make sure you do. So again, I'm going to line up my rivet spacer and mark where my rivet needs to go. So I shall go and add rivets to those. So as you can see, that's all finished. I like that on the outside. I think it adds a bit of detail to the bag. And plus, you're not having the folds against your body. So that is our Hip Mumma all finished with her strap. I would love to see your Hip Mummas, so hey, always tag us if you're sharing pictures on socials, because we love to share your pictures. If you'd like what you've seen today, please like, comment and subscribe, because the algorithm does like it.